All right, welcome back, friends, family, citizens of the Do Hard Things Nation. Welcome to another episode of the Do Hard Things podcast. I'm your host, Jay Teagues, certified high performance coach, transformational mindset coach. And on this podcast, we have great discussions with engaging guests on a variety of high performance topics and, topics of grit, and discipline, and fortitude, and overcoming adversity. And in today's episode, I'm honored to have special guest Mike Malatesta. Mike is a serial entrepreneur, podcaster, an author. He wrote the book Ownership, and we have a fantastic conversation about his book. And before we get into today's episode, just a couple quick housekeeping notes. If you haven't done so, please subscribe so you're notified of future episodes. And if you've gained any value, any insights from this podcast, I ask that you take a moment and leave us a review on Apple iTunes. They truly go a long way to expanding the reach of this podcast, help us with the rankings. And when people are looking for a podcast, the sea of podcasts that are out there, they'll get connected with the Do Hard Things podcast. And we're growing every week. The expansion is incredible. Actually, we have people from abroad. I noticed there's some people in Europe listening now, which is absolutely amazing. So the reviews go a long way. And if you've gained any insight whatsoever, I'd love you take a screenshot, share this podcast with some of your friends. If you've gained an insight that was valuable to you, reach out to me. You can reach out to me at j@jteagues.com. I'd love to hear if what did you appreciate about the guest, or even if it's on a previous episode, what was your big takeaway? Did you have an aha moment? And I love hearing about that. And people message me all the time about a variety of things that stood out to them and how that inspired them to take action in their life. And we love hearing those stories. So please let me know. This episode is sponsored by DHT Coaching and Consulting, LLC, which is founded by yours truly at j@jteagues.com. I offer one-on-one coaching, group, high-performance leadership workshops. We have the Forge Mastermind, which is basically a CrossFit gym for your mindset, so to speak, speaker series and other coaching events. We've got special challenges and accountability groups coming up. We have our first official event on September 10th. Here near Columbia, Missouri. It's going to be the Do Hard Things Nation 5K, 10K, 12-mile ruck. We're excited about that. And so go to dohardthingsnation.com if you'd like to be a sponsor or if you'd like to register for the events. We're looking for people to support and come out. And all of the proceeds will go to the Do Hard Things Foundation. And I'll be talking about that soon. So additionally, if you would like to, you want to show the world you do hard things, go to dohardthingsapparel.com and grab yourself a hoodie, a shirt, a patch. Show the world that you do hard things. We're rolling out new designs. This is the Be Present design. That's the theme of the week, is to be present. And so I'm excited about this shirt. And we've got a variety of different shirts and styles out there. So, all right, let's talk about today's guest. So today I had the honor and privilege of having Mike Malatesta on. Like I said, he's an entrepreneur, podcaster. He's a author, wrote the book Ownership. And let me read you his bio. So his bio is: I love supporting and helping entrepreneurs bring their dreams to fruition, break through barriers, and achieve massive success. I've lived in their shoes since I was 26, and I've been through them still in the roller coaster they are. I've experienced the excitement, joy, pain, grit, mistakes that come with every entrepreneur in their journey. And he is an entrepreneur that helped start, grow, and sell two amazing, successful waste management companies. One sold for mid 8 figures, while the other one sold for low 9 figures. And in his book Ownership, which we really dive into, he has a remarkable journey about losing his friend, overcoming adversity, having to face some, he was facing some significant criminal charges, and what toll that took on him. And it was really it's a remarkable book, a remarkable story. And Mike Malatesta is an open book, and he gives his insights on a variety of these topics. So he is the host of the How Did It Happen podcast, and where he explores stories, lessons, and wins with some of the most fascinating, successful people in the world. And and he's the owner of Ownership, How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. So great conversation with a very interesting person. So buckle up and let's get into today's episode with Mike Malatesta. All right, welcome, Do Hard Things Nation, to another episode of the Do Hard Things podcast. I'm your host, Jay Teagues. And I'm honored to have in studio Mike Malatesta with us, who's the owner of Ownership, how getting selfish got me unstuck. He's a podcaster. He has been a serial entrepreneur in the waste management industry and has done very well for himself. Hey, Mike, thank you so much for coming here on the podcast, sharing your story. I guess we'll just kick it off with just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, sure, Jay. Thanks for having me here today. Yeah, as you mentioned, I've spent most of my career in the waste industry. Started out with a working as a management intern or management development trainee, whatever, for a large company, and then um, about 5 years into that, I got fired from that job, and so I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, and through a series of events and sort of, I don't know, what do you call it? Divine intervention, maybe. I met up with a person and we decided to start a business together, and that business, um, became, fairly successful over a 20+ year period, and then, um, and I sold that business and then started another one similar a few years later, and we ended up selling that business for a good outcome. And so I've really been an entrepreneur since I was 26, or at least that's how I like to look at myself. And I've been a student of entrepreneurism and leadership as well. So while I've been, experiencing my own experiences growing my companies and stuff, I've been paying attention to a lot of what I see other entrepreneurs doing to try to get insights into how I could, not only improve myself but help them. And so outside of that, as you mentioned, I have a podcast. It's called How Did It Happen. You can check it out. It's pretty cool. I've been doing that for almost, well, 3.5 years. And then I wrote my first book, as you mentioned, Jay, Ownership. That was really a project that I had been noodling for a lot of years before I finally sat down and said, okay, stop noodling and just, write something. And it turned out okay. I've been getting a lot of good feedback about the book, and that's led to, having the opportunity to meet people like you, be on shows like yours, and uh, people reach out to me for coaching now. So I developed this ownership coaching model that I work with um, high performing entrepreneurs to help them imagine their futures and make them happen. And outside of that, I'm married and for 31 years, and
It's a long
we have,
time.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, we have two daughters who are doing well in life, and yeah, my life now is I'm in a great spot. I call it options, not obligations, and I just do my best to do things that light me up and help people along the way the best I can.
I'm glad that you're in a really good season in life, because in the book you've described some very difficult times that you had. And I guess I'd like to start off with, it takes a very special type of person to go the entrepreneur route.
Mhm.
What drew you to that, and how did it's especially like waste management of all things? How did you gravitate toward that? Where did that start?
Yeah, it started on the curb outside of my parents' house when I was 4 years old, and we lived across the street from a construction company. And in the summer times, in the afternoons, sometimes I would sit on that curb and I would just watch the guys bring back their trucks to the yard, and I just was really infatuated by the trucks, the noise, the smell, the dust, and the guys that drove the trucks. My dad was a truck driver, but I never got to go to work with him. But sitting on this curb was kind of like going to work with these guys, even though it wasn't anything like that really. And so a love of trucks started in me when I was, 4 years old or so, and that's kind of stayed with me, Jay. And when I was in college, between my junior and senior years, I got a job driving a garbage truck, and that introduced me to the industry. And I thought, there was something really cool about waste. Not only was there a lot of it, but it was also like a good mission. And not that I'm not going to tell you I got into it because I had a mission to, change the world or clean up the world or anything, but it seemed like a mission, like it was a necessary thing. Um, and I enjoyed it. And I went to the owner of that company and I asked him for career advice. And he told me that I should, go to one of the big companies and try to get a job as a salesperson or management trainee or something. And that's what I did. He told me to do that. So that's what I did. And that's how I got, um, into the waste business originally.
Yeah, that's interesting. I recall, I mean, as a child, my father was an over the road truck driver and diesel mechanic, and I
Hmm.
remember just kind of being around the shop, and I was always fascinated. I'm still kind of fascinated by the big rigs, right? There's just something that we're kind of drawn to. They're huge. They're the smell of the diesel fuel, like it's just I don't know.
Yeah.
They're awesome.
Yeah. And still, I mean, I've owned a lot of trucks now, and they're not as fun as they look sometimes,
Yeah,
especially when they're in the shop and they're all jacked up, you know.
yeah,
Um, but still, I get off, it's just one of those things that I don't know, I just like. And, when I'm I have this thing when I'm driving, I'm trying to guess, what kind of truck that is in front of me before I can see it based on like the mirror or whatever part I can see, and just stupid stuff like that. I still do that now.
yeah, yeah. Well, I love the title of your book, and I want to talk about being selfish, and maybe we need to kind of paint the story of how you got there. Uh, but I what I appreciate about it is that you're very open and honest about the challenges of entrepreneurism. You had some setbacks along the way. You lost
Hmm.
some friends. You lost your business partner along the way. You
Yeah.
faced some legal trouble
Yeah.
and overcame all of those things, which really got you down into to the valley and really like this almost like an awakening of sorts. So I guess I like to start off with just maybe the title of the book. Like, what does it mean to be selfish? Because that sounds like on the onset, like being selfish. Man, this guy sounds like an ass. Like, what does that
Yeah.
what does that mean? How can you get unstuck if you're selfish?
Yeah. It, it's yeah, it's one of those words that we've been taught is bad. And I think the and I and it can be bad. I'll admit that. Um, but I thought, along the way, and there's a long story to get there, but along the way, I came to the realization that, selfish isn't just the narcissistic, egotistical thing, type of person that we assign that word to now. Um, Selfish for me is really about understanding what I want, um, not not what I'm going to take from someone else, but what I want. And in my life, particularly my entrepreneurial life, that was for a long time was a real struggle for me. And in the book, I break the entrepreneurial journey up into 4 steps, and it starts with the dream, and then it goes to the grind, and then it goes to the break sometimes, and then it goes to the breakthrough. And as I was thinking about my path, a lot of the grind that I experienced was um, really the result of me being what I consider now selfless, um, meaning, I put myself last because I put everyone else first, and that's admirable. And I think there's a lot of redeeming sentiment to that, and I kind of like that. Like, I want to be that kind of person. But ultimately, when I was in that break stage, Jay, I discovered that there was no way for me to continue to be selfless with everyone until I could be selfish with me.
Mm,
So what I really meant was, where do I want to go? How do I think it's going to look when I get there? Why do I want that? And then work my way back from there. It's sort of like once I became selfish about where I wanted to go and I could figure that out, I could then become selfless again without breaking myself again.
It makes sense. I mean, I think there's a line, right, of where you're at. You can be completely giving, and that comes, like you said, it comes from a place of love where you want to just give to everyone, but you sacrifice yourself. And what I'm hearing you say, from a high performance coaching perspective, is getting crystal clear about who you are and what you want, and like owning that, like really getting after that. And what I teach is like, when you're clear about who you are and what you want, you'll become happier because you're doing what you're designed to do. And
Hmm.
the byproduct of that is everyone else around you is going to benefit from you just being
Yeah.
happy, your ability to produce and create. And as opposed to, I'm just constantly serving, because I know a lot of people, they give and give and give, and they everyone else, what they do is they run themselves into the ground, and they're never quite happy because they're not doing what they're designed to do. And it's just yeah, like I said, it
Yeah.
comes from love, but it's not fulfilling.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think I'll add one thing to that too. At least this was my experience, and I think I've seen it in a lot of other people. You use selflessness as a way to avoid the work that you need to do, the work that you actually should be doing, the hard work, like figuring out where you're going, like creating a plan for that, like leading people to that point, like creating a future that's bigger than your past, and all of those kinds of things. Like, to me, I use the selflessness thing to, putting everyone else first, really. um, well, one, I was sort of trained that way, but two, it was a lot easier for me to do that and be, the momentary hero, Jay, than it was um, to not do that and have to actually work on the stuff that I should be working on as an entrepreneur and a leader.
Yeah. It's a strange dichotomy for me being in the military, because in the military you're always taught that, the soldiers come first, and even when we go to the dining facility and we eat, everything is from the lowest private all the way up to the leaders. Leaders eat last.
Yeah.
And so it's been a really difficult mental shift to think about, I got to put myself first. I need to do things that serve me. And it really just boils down to being clear. And I think that the word selfishness doesn't have to be like an maniac or narcissistic. You just need to be clear about what you want, be actively engaged in that pursuit, realizing that you're going to be better for that, and everyone else is going to be better.
Yeah, and I like to think of it, and I haven't been in the military, so I can't speak to that directly, but I like to think of it that if I'm being my best self, I can be a really great best self to everyone else. But if I'm not, I can still eat last. But that doesn't mean that I'm serving, you know? I
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So I like that sentiment of it. And so what I like is that in your book you describe. I guess we can kind of go into, how you got to the valley of uncertainty. Would you want to go down that
Yeah.
path of kind of from as a being an entrepreneur, and how you got there and what that means?
Yeah, sure. I mean, essentially how I got there was that you know, when I first started the business in, what I call the dream stage, I got energy from everything I was doing, and I treated that business like it was a baby, because it was. And I felt like it needed me for all of its care and its nourishment, and it did. Um, but 10 years in or so, Jay, the business was no longer a baby. It was, a teenager. Um, we had a good number of people. We had a lot of stuff going on, and yet my approach to the business was still as if it needed me for all of its care and nourishment and whatever else. And so all the things that gave me energy when I first started doing them, I was still doing those things, but they weren't giving me energy anymore. They were frustrating me. I just didn't know what else to do. I just felt like that was my obligation. And so, um, just the weight of that for a long period of time, peppered with, some, sort of the day to day weight of that, peppered with some, uh, you know, experiences that I would rather have avoided, like, like having, one of our guys, die in a rollover accident. That happened quite early, and really shook me. But then I moved past that, and then it was the legal trouble that you mentioned that ended up, ended up getting indicted and convicted of a crime. And, that was very challenging. And then really the straw that sort of broke the grind back of me was when my partner Butch passed away, and as a result of some of burns that he received in a fire at one of our plants. And just the weight of all of that stuff had been chipping away at me on the inside, really, Jay, because on the outside people didn't notice this. I kept up a good face. I knew how to play the game. I knew what I should be doing. Outwardly facing, I knew what I should be doing. But inside, it was a real challenge for me, um, and ultimately nearly broke me. But fortunately, um, I did. It's kind of both ways. So fortunately and unfortunately, I dropped down into this place I call in the book the valley of uncertainty. Um, it, unfortunately, because boy, I wish I knew what I knew now, and I may have avoided that. But fortunately, because it gave me the opportunity to learn what I know now and to figure out a way to get back to where I should be, figure out a way to get selfish about my future, and then figure out a way to build a team to help me make that future real.
Yeah, there's a line that I took out of your book here, and the one common thing that I have learned about living on this planet is that we all have challenges, and there's a level of suffering that we all must endure. And there's a line in here that I highlighted, and you said, "Without the losses, failures, sacrifices, and hurts in life, how do we truly understand what our character is made of?"
Hmm.
And I really like that line because that is really like how do you know without the hardships of life? We have trials and tribulations that we all go through, and you talk about that, like with the losing, losing a member of the team, and
Right.
in a tragic vehicle accident, and then you had to, there was some your character was challenged. You talk about the I think you're trying to get a contract from an organization, and that you were awarded the contract, and the guy was like, but you came
Oh
in
yeah, yeah, yeah.
under you under you if you probably tell the story better, but you underbid. He's like, yeah, why don't you just cut a check to my son every month? And you did that for a couple months, and then how did you navigate that test of your character?
Well, I didn't at first. I navigated it poorly, right? And then,
Yeah.
um, I guess I had gotten to, so the things that got me in trouble legally happened before I started the business, right? So they happened at the company I was working with before, but they had a long tail to them, and that tail caught up with me and with other people after I had started the business. But I knew when I started the business, I knew that I didn't want to have any like I knew there was something out there from the old business, Jay. I just thought it would just go away. But I knew I didn't want to put anybody else in that kind of situation. So I was always like, I was always doing the best I could to encourage people to always do the right thing, right? Because I wasn't always doing the right thing, and I wanted to change that. And here comes this guy who basically wants me to kick back money to him, and I'm still a young person here. I'm still trying to get my business off the ground, and I'm still thinking, in the book I talk about the guy who introduced us, who carried around an envelope full of cash, and that was the kind of the way he did business. And I thought, well, all right. But I did, but the first time I did it, it felt bad, and the second time I did it, it felt horrible, and the third time I did it, if I did it 3 times, I did it 2 or 3 times. But whatever, it just felt like, okay, this is just, I can't do this. Yeah, I'm at now. I know, and this is what I'm telling everybody, and here's what I'm doing. That's just doesn't square up. And so I went to him and I said, I can't do this anymore, expecting to lose the business. But it also taught me a great lesson when I didn't lose the business, right? So you don't have to do what people ask you to do. You can do what's right, what you think is best, and it may not have any different impact. You kind of, you tell yourself stories, right, Jay? And I told myself a story that's what needed to be done, and it wasn't that bad, and I did it. And then I realized, no, it is. It's not only, I not only do I not have to do this, but it's not right. It goes against what I'm telling other people to do. What does that make me? So I
Yeah.
stopped.
Yeah, you wrote, my moral compass was broken, but there's still a chance it could be fixed, and I wanted to take that chance.
Yeah, I wanted to take that chance. Yeah.
And that's tough because I think in life, that's part of life. I think we're all of our characters are tested, and I would say that we have all. I think most people have probably done something that I don't know, until you cross that line. It's hard to understand what that feeling is, but it's really like, okay, are we going to self correct, or are we going to continue to go down this path? And I think that's
Yeah.
the difference maker, right?
So I agree with you. And I mean, this is what I believe. If, if people are easy to be talked into things, easy. Otherwise, you wouldn't see all the kinds of things that happen in the world, right? So when 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 someone gets on a high character horse, I I think to myself, well, maybe, but chances are that someone's talked them into something, or they've talked themselves into something at some point that they would not want their mother to read on a billboard that she drove past, right? But people easily put that stuff aside. They easily, you know, they never forget it, but they put it aside. It gets packed up somewhere that they never go to, a place they never go to. And when it and they just won't admit to it, even though it's probably happened. And I guess my point in there is like it's okay to, it's okay to have some things happen. I mean, it's what you do with it that matters. Um, and if you make a career out of having a compromised moral compass, then that's a choice that you made. That for me, I went down the path and I decided that was not the choice I wanted to make. But I'm also not going to say I'm not going to pretend that it never happened, because it did happen. And yeah, so I think that word gets kicked around a lot, character, and in entrepreneurial circles, people say, well, yeah, I'm, a character and all these things. And I don't not believe them. I just don't, I think it would be better if they talked about when their character was compromised, because it surely was at some point in their life, and how that, changed them and got them, and how they feel, and how they are now. Um, But as I said at the beginning, um, people can be talked into things. I know I could, and if I thought that the person that was talking to me about it was someone of status that I wanted to impress, or I wanted to make happy, or I wanted to be perceived as being good to, I would do it.
Yeah. I love that you have the courage to openly like talk about this and just kind of be a lighthouse and just share with people, the challenges and how you face this situation, and you admit to, having your character compromised, but you made the choice to turn this thing around, because I think people need to hear those stories. We don't talk about these things enough, because I think all of us at one time or another have our character compromised. And how can we need to educate and help people like navigate these things. So I appreciate your open and honesty about this.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure.
Now, when it comes to like the continued, like, because you had a full FBI investigation, was
hmm
was this part of that, or was there something bigger that had happened? Can you talk to us a little bit about that situation?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What bigger
I,
than
you were facing some criminal charges because
yeah.
in the book you were kind of talking about this incident, and I don't know if this had anything to do with that or if this was the
Oh,
starting point of some other situations that had happened that led to an FBI investigation.
oh, no, no, no. The thing that we were just talking about happened uh, completely independently of
Okay.
that. So that investigation began as a result of um, some things that we were doing when I worked at the first company that I worked for out of college. So
Oh, okay. So this is before you started your own business.
yeah, correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
hmm They just it just caught up with me after I had started the business.
Yeah, because that was like an 8-year process, right? That you
Yeah,
had.
it's a really really long process. I had started the business, and I think we were 2 years in before I even was first contacted. So, and then from that time, it was another, yeah, like 6 years. I mean, it took a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about. I mean, you mentioned at the time. I didn't even never really thought of this, but I know that there's a lot of cases that I've dealt with within the military and just hear about, and that you mentioned there that the time delay is actually intentional. For
Yeah,
it's a tactic that prosecutors use because that's how they can unravel like a conspiracy or whatnot. Because the people have to live, especially people with character, right? That are like you're you're constantly under this pressure, right? It takes a toll on your mind and your relationships, and it's hard to
yeah.
keep a
It's
secret, right?
yeah,
So
it's a difficult process, and I mean, I can only speak about my own experience, but um, in this situation, I was working for a big company. The FBI was made aware of some things that were happening at a very local level, right? Um, where I had at a location I happened to have worked at, and they basically, their thing was, if it was just a nobody company, like a little small mom and pop or something, they probably wouldn't even have done anything, Jay. But they saw, here's an opportunity, and I wonder how far up this goes. That's kind of how they think, because if it goes up high, they want to go up high. Um, and they have they have a with a big company, they know they have the potential for a fine and significant sort of dollars. So my experience was that they start low and they try to get people to admit what they've done without going to trial or anything, which I did, and a number of my colleagues did. And then once they get that, then they go to the people that are a little higher up, and they say, "Well, Mike's already on board here, and he's told us, this and that." And then it just keeps working its way up until they hit the ceiling of, oh, this is where it stopped, and that's what takes a long time. Or the
when you were working in the organization, like were you aware that the organization was doing some unruly things or
Yeah, we always characterized what we were doing as operating in gray areas. So, did we know that it was not 100%? Yes. Did we think that it was what it ended up becoming? No. And we wouldn't, I don't think we would have engaged in it if we thought that. But we were fooling ourselves, Jay. We were just like making our own rules. And, if we could justify them as being in this gray area, then gray was okay.
so what advice would you give someone if they're listening to this right now and they're working for an organization or maybe they're an entrepreneur and they know that they're kind of operating in the gray. What advice would you give them given your situation and what had happened to you?
Well, before I give you the advice, what's really interesting? We were talking about the character thing earlier, and I don't know. I mean, I've just been around a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs in my career, and one of the things I find very striking is that some people are one person at work, and they will put up with, justify, all of those things they will do at work. They would never do those things at home with their friends. It's just a whole different mask that you wear. when it comes to business. But I think the most solid advice I can give is, if someone asks you to do something and it doesn't feel right, ask them to explain it again, and why, why what you're asking me to do is okay. You need to make me feel a little bit better about what you're asking me to do. And then just think about, if I do this and I love that billboard thing. If I do this and I put that up on a billboard in my town, and my mom came by and read that, would she be happy with me, or would she be embarrassed by me? And if you don't have a mom, then whoever the most significant person in your life is, who you care what they think the most, and put it up there. And if the answer is yes, then that's a matrix you've run through, and you think to do it. And if the answer is no, then don't do it.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think about a time that when I was a military recruiter, that's a job where it's just the culture and the conditions are just designed to really force you, or encourage you to operate in the gray area. It's like there's some like rules that are absolutes. Then there's some things that's kind of like you can kind of skirt around some of these things. And the pressure of putting someone in the military was so incredibly high that, our recruiting company that I was involved in, the organization around St. Louis, was investigated, and recruiters were doing some things like manufacturing documents and, encouraging people to withhold information that's counter to our Army culture.
Right.
I had gotten investigated for something that happened to me. I had every intent of, the pressure was, we got to achieve the mission, we got to get the job done. And I recall going up to bat for this kid who just had a very troubled youth. And I saw a lot of myself in him. And I cut some corners on some things and kind of influenced something that ultimately landed into his file in the court system. That was basically a go to war or go to jail situation, which the military doesn't do that anymore. Like, we stay far away from that. And what I wrote was filed as part of trying to get him off of probation. And as soon as that was like filed in the documentation, I had investigation on me. And,
Yeah.
my intent was, I mean, if I go back, I crossed the line. I was trying to influence someone to let him join the military as opposed to facing, some criminal charges. And I learned the hard way. And that investigation it was very difficult for me, knowing that I put myself in that situation knowingly, with the intent of trying to do good for him, trying to do good for the Army. And ultimately, I got a little slap on the wrist, but it could have ended my career.
Yeah. How did you feel about it when you first were contacted about it, Jay? Was your sense to be like, no, that was totally fine? I mean, or was your sense like, oh, shoot,
I knew that I stepped on it, but I did it. I was as soon as I got the call, like, oh, you're being investigated. Like, I just like that feeling of like, oh my gosh, here we go. I mean, it's just, this is going to be a huge ordeal. I'm gonna have to go in front of the commander, and who knows? I was actually putting my officer candidate packet in. I'm like, my whole trajectory of my career is over. I had a lot to lose.
yeah.
But my intent was to really help the individual out, and I skirted I skirted in the gray area super hard. But at the end of the day, I was wrong. I was
Yeah.
wrong. And I think what really saved me and got me the slap on the wrist was I basically, I gave them my intention of what I was trying to do, and I owned the fact that I was pushing, of what I did. And so the commander, because they, that's the judge, jury, and punisher, gave me a pretty good slap on the wrist. It could have been far worse. It could have been a career ending thing, but he understood what I was trying to do. And I took ownership of the situation. And I
Okay.
think that's ultimately why I got the outcome, and I continued on with my career.
Yeah, and my experience was similar. Like when I first got contacted, it was it was scary. It was what it was. Like when you pick up the phone and it's somebody from the FBI on the phone, that ain't a good day. That's not a good day. And it was very scary. And then my first instinct was like, what do you mean? Like this is me talking to myself. What do you mean? No, we didn't. No, it wasn't. I just went into the same thing I would have done when I was talking to my buddies when we were actually doing this stuff, right? Like, no, it's cool. But when you sit down and you start explaining, and it comes out like, wait a second, that doesn't sound right at all.
Yeah.
It's it's a very sobering moment, but ultimately, I I know it's easy to say, like, every experience is a good experience in your life because you learn from it and that kind of thing. Um, but this was a good experience for me because it taught me consequences in a way that I hadn't. I mean, I knew what consequences were, but I didn't know what those kinds of consequences were, Jay. So it taught me that, and then it taught me really this whole thing that I was just talking about. Like, it's you can't have yourself be talked into things that you don't think are are right for you. And that's really changed me because I don't and I probably, if that hadn't happened, maybe I spent my whole life like that, Jay, like in gray areas all the time, justifying what I'm doing and and just living like a double life, like one life at work and one life at home they're dichotomies. They're like, they're just different.
Yeah, your situation was an order of magnitude worse than mine because you were facing like hard time and
Yeah.
some hefty fines. And so, but the feelings that I have, I can empathize with that because I felt like I feel like I have learned a tremendous amount from that situation. Where going forward, like I was not going to put myself in a situation ever like that again, and help other people avoid the same by sharing that particular story. And that's just one of those trials and hardships I think that I had to endure, uh, just for that whatever that lesson was,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that's I try to use this as an opportunity now, and I've talked about it to quite a few people, and hopefully, in an effort to help people avoid the same mistake.
Yeah, and me too. That's one of the reasons I could have easily not had that in the book, Jay. I mean, easily I could have not talked about that situation at all because, um, it happened a long time ago, and people don't know me like that, right? They don't. It's just like a non-issue, right? But inside, to me, it was always an issue because I always thought that I would meet somebody. And I'm like, do they know about you know? And the answer, of course, was no, and nobody really cared, but I cared. I cared. It was just always in the back of my mind. So I thought, well, if I'm going to write a book, not only is it an important story, so I should put it in there, but it's also going to, really just take the pressure off of me because I don't, now I'm not that I was ever hiding anything. It just never came up, but
Yeah,
I was just like, well, it's out there. And like it always was. Now it's just out there in my words, and that just makes me feel good. Like I don't think about it anymore, like I used to.
yeah.
And yeah,
I think that speaks to your character and the courage that you face to talk about that, and knowing that, it bothers me that people need to know this about me, that I had this experience. And
right.
I think that's the mark of a strong leader, because I think good leaders talk about their shortcomings. They talk about these lessons that they learned, and be that lighthouse for everyone else.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that was definitely a pivotal moment for you, and but ultimately, I think it all came to a head when you lost your business partner, Butch. And I could
Yeah.
tell in your book how did losing Butch impact you?
Well, he he was the person who gave me the confidence to get into the business in the first place. He was the person who had, faith in me. he was the biggest supporter that I've ever had. He was a very good friend, and we were like, a yin and a yang, I guess, to one another. Um, Complementary skill sets, complementary um, mindsets. We just, for two guys who didn't know each other very well before they got into business with each other, I don't think we could have picked a better person to each of us to align with. And I always looked up to him as being, and he's about 10 years older than I. Uh, um, no, 15 years older. And so I looked up to him as like, you know, like he was just a guy that gave up everything. He had a family, he had all of this responsibility, and he like put it all, like he, went all in on this thing with me. And that's a that's a hell of an endorsement. And then he was just the hardest working, strongest person that I'd ever met. And when it first happened, I got a call and to tell me about it, and they said, Butch is in bad shape, and I thought, well, you know, it's Butch. He's been in bad shape before. I'm not gonna worry about this. I mean, he's like, like a little Superman. I don't think this is gonna be a problem. And then um, when I saw him later that night, briefly when they rolled him into the hospital, it was like, oh. And then I got to see him the next day. I think it was the next day, briefly, and of course, um, he wasn't conscious or anything, so we weren't able to chat or anything. But I mean, it was just a devastating visual. And then a couple days after that, he passed away. So it went from me thinking, okay, well, this is just another thing; it'll be fine, to losing him, in a couple of days. And at that point, I just, and I do end up talking about this in the book. I was, I felt responsible for his death. I felt responsible for what happened to him. Um, I just felt like it was all my fault. And it just, really made me think about whether I wanted to keep moving on with this business and doing these things, because look what happened. It's like, I think I say in the book, if you can put aside, what happened to Billy, and the FBI thing, and what happened to Butch, then yeah, we were doing all right. Like, what do you mean if you can put all that aside? It's like silly.
Yeah, those
So
were some significant events. Yeah.
it was very significant. And it was just hard. I needed a lot of time to get past it, for sure.
How did you overcome your feelings of responsibility and continue on despite all the feelings and the experiences that you had prior to this?
Well, one of the things that ended up happening to me in the valley, while I was in the valley, Jay, was I flipped this whole notion of being responsible, um, as opposed to having the responsibility for, um, because as I mentioned, I felt responsible for everything. And when you feel responsible for things, it's personal, and it really, at least in my experience, it really weighs on you in a personal level. Like, you think it is who you are. And when I was able to flip that to thinking that I have the responsibility for everything, but I can't be personally responsible for everything. It's just not, I can't do it. I can't do that. I still have the responsibility. Now, maybe that's just, like a little mind trick, but for me, that worked really well, because having the responsibility for something doesn't mean that it's part of who I am. It's just something that I need to do. Whereas, as I mentioned, when I was feeling like I was responsible for everything, that was really part of my character. It was part of who I am, and I didn't want to be defined by things that happened, say, on my watch, but not necessarily because of something that I personally, did. So that was very helpful for me. I think it's helpful would be helpful for a lot of people, because once you remove the personal part of it, provided you aren't the reason, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole different conversation. But then I was able to like go, okay, this is, I got to dust myself off, and I have to take responsibility for this, and I have to fix what's broken, and we have to move forward.
Yeah, there are a lot of in my community space, in the veteran community, there's a lot of people that have had like traumatic things happen to them where they, maybe they were in a firefight and lost, someone on their team, uh, and they feel ownership of that. They feel like it was their fault, because they were a part of the situation, but they really basically trying to control something that you didn't have any control over,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
letting go of that, detaching that.
Yeah. Because again, that's a good example. Thank you for that. Like in the case of with Butch, I mean, he made decisions that day that were, were counter to our policies and procedures, and counter to his own best um, will, like his own, like he knows better, but he did it, and unfortunately, it had very dramatic consequences for him and for other people. Um, I, ultimately, I have responsibility for that. But it was, he made choices that
Yeah.
that got him where he was.
So you describe in the book, after this had happened, you basically had this epiphany where, you got out a legal pad, you identified your four fallacies, and then basically taking inventory. And I kind of want to kind of highlight maybe some of the four fallacies. And I'll just read them here real quick. You believed you could handle everything that came your way and do it alone.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of people that think that they can just go at it alone. And so, why is that one of your fallacies?
Um, because I believed it worked, so that's why it's a
Yeah.
fallacy. But you lull yourself into these belief systems sometimes, because it did work for me for a long time, Jay. Like, and I put value on me by how I could independently um, figure things out, or uh, find the answers to, or those kinds of things. And so it was a way that um, I wasn't going to let somebody else outwork me, and I wasn't going to pay somebody for something I could figure out. So that's why that's just who I was.
Mm.
And for a period of time, it worked really. Yeah, I convinced myself that it worked really well. But it all ties into the selfish, selfless thing, right? So what was I, maybe I could do everything myself, but what was I giving up in order to do that? Right? Is that really what was I really doing my job to do that, or was I just stroking my ego, or whatever? um
Yeah, there's a lot of people that do that, right? They especially in the business world, I can do the job, so why outsource this? Why delegate it to someone else? But what you do is you keep yourself from doing the main thing that you're truly good at, and you're depriving someone else the opportunity to come in and kind of help you scale the business and grow the organization, because you only have so much bandwidth,
yeah,
and a
so
lot of
true.
times that is ego driven, right?
Yeah, so true. Although I convinced myself that I had unlimited bandwidth for a while, and
Hmm.
it so I'm a slow learner.
Sometimes we got to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
Hence the two hard things, because that's how I've learned every lesson in my life is usually the hard way.
Nice.
So the second fallacy, you were responsible for everything that happened to you. We kind of
Yeah,
talked about that.
that's
Yeah.
talked about that one. Yeah.
The way you thought of your future.
Yeah. I thought my future was going to be like my past. Why would I think it would be any different? I'd been conditioned to, um, through the way I operated to, invite this grind into my life and get me to the point where I, you know, feel like I broke and dropped into the valley of uncertainty. And here I was, trying to figure out what to do. Why would I think that my going forward would be any different than what it's been, up to this point? But one of the things I figured out that changed my view on that was, um, hey, you know what? I've designed a system that was perfectly suited to put me exactly where I am. So I can look for someone to blame for that, which I did. I can I can not take I can not take responsibility for that, which I tried. Um, or I can say, you know what, that's kind of a bummer to admit that, but once I admit that, then I also have the power, I think, to look ahead and say, well, if I could design a system that was perfect to put me here, and I don't like here, I don't want to be here, then I can probably design a system that puts me somewhere else, that gets me where I actually want to be. And so it was a really interesting aha for me to, um, for that to finally click, for me to be aware that where I wasn't it wasn't some mystery. Someone didn't do this to me. I did it. Here's how I did it. So if I want to get somewhere else, let's get to work on designing something different.
Yeah, that kind of goes hand in hand and having clarity. I think a lot of people kind of fall into this. They look at their past as a reference point for where they're going in the future. It's like driving your car and looking in the rearview mirror. You can
Yeah.
do that, but it's not optimal. It's not ideal.
Well, think about how many people wake up every day and their belief system is that today is going to be just like yesterday.
Yeah.
Hopefully not worse. That's kind of how people go through life, and that's how I was feeling. And when you like, who wants to who wants to live like that, right? So this whole thing about accepting that you are where you are because of you, like I said, it can be a bummer, but if you look at it as a bad thing, but it can also be really cathartic if you look at it as a good thing, right? Well, I was able to put myself here. Where can I put myself tomorrow? Um,
Yeah.
and then just take it one day at a time from there if you can. But boy, oh boy, if you can't see tomorrow as being more interesting than today, that's a tough way to go through life.
That is a very tough way to go. And I think that I have been there at my lowest points. And I think a lot of people live that way, and it's a challenge. Finally, your fourth fallacy was isolation. You avoided prison, but you created your own. So
Yeah.
you isolated yourself. How did you go about doing that? Why did you do that?
Well, it kind of goes with that first one, where I just think I can outwork everybody, So I I always felt, or for a long time, I felt like asking for help was like cheating, right? So I didn't want to ask for help, and so I basically um, thought, and this is not a good thought, but I thought that everything I needed to know about how to run my business and how to grow it and how to do all the things I wanted to do was right inside of it. And if I and I wasn't thinking as I was doing it that I was building these walls. That was a reflection, like if I reflected back on that time, what was I doing? And I was really I was really doing two things. I was thinking that I could mine all the things that I had to know right out of my own sort of field. And I also was thinking that if I go outside, that's like cheating, and I don't want to be one of those lazy people that goes outside and cheats. Um, So yeah, so the reason that those are all, I'm thank you for going through those with me, Jay. The reason that those are all fallacies, folks, is because they are they're not they're incorrect, but they're strong. They were very strong, and I'm sure that if you're listening, you've got your own stories you tell yourself that are very strong stories, and you believe them, um, but they may not be true. And
Absolutely, which is why I love that you shared these, because I think we all have bullshit. We all have our fallacies. We all have, like, you got this inventory on that you wrote down on a legal pad of all the things that are holding you back. You have
right,
to have awareness of these things in order to have a compelling vision of the future. In order to shore these things up, you need to focus on your strengths, but you have to have awareness of your shortcomings and these things that are holding you back, and shore these things up. But without a level of awareness, it's going to be very hard for you to deal with them.
yeah,
And
you will unconsciously keep yourself stuck for a very, very long time, even when you can say all the right things, Jay. If you don't change the way you actually feel and think about yourself, and what how you value your um, contribution, your unconsciousness will keep you frustrated and stuck very, very powerfully.
yeah, which is hard for most people, because your subconscious and your unconsciousness, like, your mind is constantly running, and you have these things that are holding you back, and you may not even realize it unless you sit down and do some of the deep work that's required.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a student of this now, and I've been involved in high performing entrepreneur groups for a long time now, and there are so many of us who they 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 know what they're supposed to be saying. They say it, but I can tell that it's not true. And I don't mean that they're lying. I can just tell that they're not living it because they haven't gotten rid of these what I call these unconscious sort of habits and behaviors that have validated them their whole life. And it's one thing to say, I'm going to do X and we do this and all this stuff. And it's a whole nother thing to, if those things aren't part of your natural DNA, what you've built for yourself,
Mhm.
doing them is you'll go out of your way not to do any of them, because you'll just be reinforcing what you've always done.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I like the inventory. There's a couple here I just kind of want to highlight, because you had this
Yeah.
list of, like, taking inventory of some of the things that
Yeah,
you
that
wrote
was
down on a
fun.
legal pad, and there's a couple of them that kind of stood out to me because I can empathize with that. I need to get over being embarrassed about what I don't know.
Yeah. Do you have
That's
that problem? I have that problem.
I have that problem,
Yeah.
especially in the military, where it's just like, there's not. For example, there's this one thing that we do a lot that's really problematic. We have a lot of acronyms, and so you'll be sitting in a brief, they'll be throwing out, like, acronym, like, you'll. It's not uncommon to have like 4 or 5 acronyms in this sentence, and it's kind of like, I don't know what that means, but I don't want to raise my hand and look like an idiot.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
And so you kind of like whisper to the guy next to you, like, what does that mean? And I don't know, if it's something really silly, they'll start making fun of you or whatever. But it's that. But in the line of work that we do, like, if you don't have fully understanding of what's going on and what that acronym means, that could, that could be failure. That could cost uh, equipment damage, or ultimately lives lost. So getting over being embarrassed about what I don't know, and I have learned to kind of raise my hand. Like, it's better, just, that's ego. It's usually ego
Yeah.
driven. And I've learned to put my ego aside in that regard.
So, good for you, by the way.
That's
So for
hard to do,
me,
man.
yeah. Well, yeah, I struggled with that for a long time. It's one of the reasons I think too, when we were talking about the walls before, it was one of the reasons that I built those walls, right? Because I didn't want to, in addition to like asking for help is cheating, I didn't want to get into a place where I was where I felt like I didn't know what was happening. And it was kind of weird too, because I was never a person like with people that I know, I would never one of those people who would like try to BS you, that I didn't know something. It was easy for me to say, I don't know, or I have to get back to you because whatever. But outside, getting into a group, when someone would ask your opinion about something, I was that was very difficult for me because I thought to myself, whatever I'm going to say is probably going to sound stupid to these other people. So I wouldn't offer. And then when I got asked, I would be very nervous. I would, get red in the face. I just, I, it was scary. It was scary. Um, Fortunately, and it still is, but I'm much better at it now than I used to be, largely because I've put myself in those situations and conditioned myself to get past them. And I also have become pretty aware that there aren't that many people out there who are looking at what you say as and judging you as being stupid. They're just trying to make progress in life just like you are. But that was a hard one for me. It was very difficult.
I've learned by just can't being candid about what I don't know. People will come up, especially if it's like an open forum, and just raise my hand and say, "Hey, I don't know the answer."
Yeah.
Someone will come up to me like, "Man, I'm glad that you said that because I didn't know either," and a lot of it's just because we don't want to. We're scared of judgment of other people, so we hold ourselves back. And I'm
Yeah, for
kind of
sure.
coaching my daughters through this now because they're naturally introverted, and when they're struggling in school, I'm like, "Are you?" Especially like Phoebe, she's really struggling with math. She's in algebra. I'm like, well, are you asking the teacher for help? Are you raising your hand? Well, no, I don't want to hold up the class. I don't want to my peers to judge me, the fellow students, right? I don't want the teacher to think I'm dumb, all
Yeah.
of these things. But this is a powerful lesson that people need to learn is that one, like I said, most people, there's a lot of people out there that probably have the same question. And it takes a little bit of courage to get it out there, but you're going to be better for it if you just lean in on it.
Very true. Good advice.
That's definitely a tough one. All right, another one that I had a question on. I need to make fewer decisions and more choices.
Yeah.
What does that one mean?
Well, I think this will probably resonate with a lot of people. When like as an entrepreneur or any kind of leader, people are coming to you with questions all the time, and um, you s- you have a you can have a tendency to start to value yourself by how quickly you can make decisions that help other people. And felt like I was really good at that, um, but but it occurred to me, like, is that really what I should be doing? Is making decisions all the time, or should I really be focused on choices, making which, and I consider choices to be more introspective, more thought out. The quickness doesn't matter with the choice. It's sort of a more considered thing. And so um, that's the distinction I was trying to make there, because making a lot of decisions was one of those things that was, again, I think, how stopping me from doing the work I'm supposed to be doing. Being the leader, creating a future, all of those things, knowing what I want, and um, just rethinking it that way helped me to make less decisions, give more decision making power to other people, and focus myself really on making choices that impact me and impact the business.
Yeah, yeah. Delegating decision-making authority within your organization, I think it's very powerful to developing a culture within your organization and developing leaders. You got to and empowering other people to make those choices or
Right.
decisions rather, and then you're making choices which are more conscious.
That's how I like to think about it. Yeah.
I tell my kids all the time, make good choices, and that's really it. I mean, because a decision could be like Coke or Pepsi, or you're making constant decisions throughout the day. But a
Yeah,
choice is
exactly.
something a little bit more deliberate, right? Am I going to make the choice to? Am I going to cut that check and drop it in the envelope to that son,
Yes. Right.
or no? You know what? I'm not going to make that choice anymore. yeah.
It good.
So
Yeah.
that
Way to bring that back. Yeah. Very
yeah,
good.
I just find that a powerful lesson, man. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so let's see another one. I like this one. The bar doesn't always need to be high.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you see a lot of trainers, right? They'll say you need time for your body to, um, recharge. You can't be pushing it to the max all the time. You actually get, you get weaker by pushing your body to the max all the time. Get stronger if you let it, rest. And I, I was not a restful person. Um, I always wanted me and my team to be pushing the boundaries of our capabilities at an accelerated rate. And I think that I do think that's a a good approach. It's a good way to challenge people and yourself. But I never knew, I never took time to celebrate. Never, that was never like, hey, we're gonna take the afternoon off to, recharge. Or I was just always like, well, okay, so we did that. So my instinct was just like, okay, we did that, so we can do a little bit more, and that'll be great. Everybody will love that, and I got a lot of energy from that, I thought, but I don't know that everyone else did, Jay, and I don't know that I did, because um, you need that time, you need downtime, and you need to get down in order to go up, sort of thing, and that's what I meant there. I can't, I can't keep setting the bar higher all the time. It's got to go higher in overtime, of course, but it doesn't have to be go higher every moment.
I think that's a struggle with a lot of entrepreneurs or people in leadership, is like they're grinding, grinding, grinding. They got to hit the benchmarks. They got to hit the benchmarks. And then it's like you hit it. It's like, okay, cool. Now what's next? Like get to the next thing. And that's, you can achieve a lot of things, and there's a lot of people that can get a lot of things done, but how do we enjoy the ride along the way? And that's
Right.
really like taking the moment to acknowledge what you've accomplished. And it doesn't have to be a huge party or a celebration, but maybe, like you said, maybe it's take the afternoon off. Or I'm a running coach, so when someone hits a big milestone, maybe they hit their first marathon, hey, why don't you go buy yourself a new pair of running shorts or new pair of shoes, and just acknowledge that you did this awesome thing. And it's the little things like that that enable you to have a reference point and acknowledge that you did something awesome. And then, yeah, it doesn't mean that you don't set another goal,
Yeah,
but
right.
just take a moment to enjoy what you just did, because you just rolled up your sleeves and did all this work. But
Yeah,
if it's
that's great
never
advice.
enough, then you're always grinding and you're never going to be satisfied.
Right. Yeah, and that's definitely, I mean, all those things I talk about there and with the fallacies and all are all things that, over this, let's say 8-year period of 8, 9-year period of what I call grind in the book, for me at least, were all things that just sort of just kept weighing and weighing and weighing, and and I just didn't see them. I just didn't see them until after, it broke.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a powerful one for sure. That I definitely try to help people, and I'm bad about it myself. In the military culture, it's like nothing's ever enough. It's like you do this, you do that. It's like, all right, what's on to the next thing. And I think that's how a lot of people get completely burned out. That's how they get broken. That's how they get miserable and unhappy. And it's definitely something that takes a little effort to and focus. So now, like when I coach people on achieving a goal, I always put in there, what's your reward? How are you gonna acknowledge that?
Nice.
So it's important.
That's a good point. I gotta remember that. That's a good point. Yeah, to
Yeah.
help people with that.
Yep. Yep. And I'll be like, okay, what's the consequence if you don't make it too? Like we have, like, it's a double edge. So if you don't make it, what are you going to do?
Right,
It
right,
could
right.
be, donating some money or some time to someone or something like that, or, they do something, but it's kind of like, okay, it's almost like a bet, right? It almost feels that way, but really celebrating and acknowledging the win is incredibly important.
Agreed.
So, well, I guess as the tail end of your book, it sounds like you had a huge transition when you joined Strategic Coach Mastermind. And so, what drew you to joining something like that, and what lessons did you learn from joining a mastermind?
Well, what drew me to it? So it was a complete accident, but a convergence of, I had started to go outside of my walls as part of my recovery, and I was at a breakfast meeting at the local Chamber of Commerce in Milwaukee, and um, one of the speakers, his name was Johnny Vasallo, and he owned restaurants in town, and he was very successful. And he's telling us about, his career and how he started working. I think it was in his uncle's restaurant. He's taking us through the whole thing, which was, interesting. But when he really got my attention was when he, started talking about some of the challenges he faced, and how someone had recommended this program called Strategic Coach to him, and he joined, and he was just talking about a couple of things that changed for him, and I was like, I thought he was just there talking to me at that point, and I thought, okay, so that sounds exactly like what I need. And it was just like I say, just the convergence of me taking that first step to be in that room in the first place, which I normally wouldn't have done. And then, him, talking about this thing, and I I went and I um signed up and started going, and it took me a long time, like 3 years before I started to get any traction out of that, significant traction out of that program. But it was just, for me, it was the very first step to understanding how my journey and my future could be different than my past, which is something we talked about earlier. Um, and there, other people, there are a lot of ways to have that epiphany, I suppose. But for me, that was the very first step in having that, was going to, hearing Johnny mention it, and then going to that program. And it, that started to reprogram my whole belief system. And once my belief system was reprogrammed, my future became something that I could be very selfish about,
Yeah.
in a good way.
So you were part of the program for 3 years before you really started to see some traction. Why did you continue to go?
Well,
'Cause that's a long
when I
time.
say, yeah, so I guess I should be clear about this. When I was get I was believing what I was being told, but I was still overcoming, the four fallacies, I guess, right? So, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me, but mm, I still got this powerful thing that says, like having an assistant, for example, is one of the things they tell that, they they teach you how important that is, when you first get in there. And everybody seemed like everybody had one, except I was the only one who didn't have one. And so rather than me being like, okay, I should do that, I'd be like, these people are all lazy. Like, I don't, or they want to feel like they're important or something. So it took a long time to reframe, kind of like what I was talking about earlier. You can say all the right things, but why I kept going was because I needed to change, and I didn't have anything else to go to,
Mm.
and so I kept going.
Did you have like so when you did have did you have like a big breakthrough moment? Like you knew that you finally dropped the four fallacies, you had your big aha.
Well, yeah, the biggest, well, not dropped all of them at the same time, but having hiring an assistant was just a dramatic breakthrough for me. It it helped me overcome a lot of the components of the fallacies that I had, Jay. And it was very difficult for me to do that because I was in my head, I was going through all the reasons why this is not going to be good. But once I did it, and Robin joined me, and I've been working with her ever since. Um, my whole life started to be different. My whole work life and even my personal life started to be different. And all the things that I was holding on to as having value to me, and value, the way I was valuing my contribution to the organization, started to change, because I could really start to let go of things and no longer worry about them. Like, I was one of those guys who had piles of stuff all over the place, Jay, things I was working on in the middle of, and that was a lot of pressure always looking at me, like, but um, the majority of those things I didn't need to be working on at all.
Mhm.
And, she helped me to understand that someone else could take those things and get them where they needed to be, and actually get them off my desk and get them out into the real world without me doing anything more with them, for example. Um, so that was very, and once that belief system changed, then I saw the power. I started to see the power, and then I could do a lot more things. Yeah, that's how it came to be.
Yeah, so it required you to really let go of some things and
For sure.
delegate, that, and it made you far more productive. That was the moment that it changed.
Yes, for sure. That was the first one. Yeah, for sure.
Toward the very end of the book, you talk about the joining the executive committee, and you talk about Roy.
Yeah,
And
Roy DePlanta.
Roy made me laugh. Like, you described
Yeah.
Roy as a guy that, he just not holding back, like just being yourself. And it just made me think, like, wow, we all should be like Roy. Could you tell us a little bit about Roy and, why we should be more like Roy?
Yeah, so the executive committee, which is now called Vistage International, that I was looking for some after I had my strategic coach experience, I was looking for something that would get me around people who had built larger companies, which is what I wanted to do. And majority of the people in the coach program have smaller companies. Um, they're very successful, but they have smaller. It's just a different business model for a lot of them. Um, so I joined this group. Um, uh, uh, Tech is what we always called it, TEC, the executive committee. And boy, that was nerve wracking, because all the people in there were older than I was. They almost all had bigger companies than I had, and I had that same thing. Like, I thought I wasn't over that. Uh, I don't want to be in a position where I think I'm dumb, or come across as stupid. But Roy really helped me with that. Not we didn't. It wasn't like a mentoring thing, or there was just me watching him. So Roy, at the time, was in his early 70s, and he was like third generation running this large manufacturing company, and obviously he knew a lot. Um, and he dressed very dapper, very professional dress. And But you'd get into these meetings, and usually in the meetings you have a speaker come and talk to us about something that could impact our business, culture, or you know process, or there are all kinds of, there's like, you name it, presentation, whatever. And Roy, every time we'd have a speaker, Roy would like just ask what he was not afraid to ask any question at all. And it wasn't like he was serious. Like, he was very willing to admit that he didn't know what they were talking about, or he needed clarification or whatever. And he would ask the question in a very interesting way, which I detail in the book. And then he was just so comfortable in himself. He'd get the answer, and then he'd tell the person, "You know what? You're the smartest effing person I've ever met." To be like, "What did that guy just say?" This good and then and then and then he'd fall asleep, or whatever. He just didn't. He just that guy just sort of walked to his own drum beat. And I thought to myself, well, if he's this successful and this is how he operates, what do I have to be afraid of? Um, so yeah, Roy really taught me that I got to get over myself, and like you were saying earlier, if you don't know something, you're, you know, ready to raise your hand. Well, I was never ready to raise my hand, but now that helped me get ready to raise. That helped me raise my hand. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, we all need to be more like Roy. Just throw it out there. Be yourself. Be authentically you. Be
yeah.
authentic.
Yeah,
The
for
guy's very
sure.
congruent, very confident in himself, and just he was just out there.
He
I
was.
love the story.
It was so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one more thing in here, and then we'll kind of transition to a couple high performance questions and wrap it up. But
Okay.
you mentioned goal setting is important. Every inch of progress is a new sprout of capability. You know, as you become, as you gain progress, you increase your courage, and your confidence continues to grow. But you mentioned something: goals in concrete, plans in sand. Could you elaborate on that? Because I like the concept of where you're going there, but I just wanted to kind of hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah.
What do goals in concrete mean and plans in sand mean?
Yeah. I don't know if he came up with it, but that came over to me in an email from a fellow named Chuck Zamora, who's a coach that I know from Wisconsin, and I get his weekly email blast or whatever, and it said goals in concrete, plans in sand, and I was thinking about it, and um, one of the things that I was challenged with, Jay, was when I was setting goals, I was really hung up on knowing how to achieve the goal. And when I got that, it started me thinking like, by the way, I think a lot of people are hung up on that. Like they set a goal and they're like, well, I don't know how to achieve that goal, so I can't really set that goal. But when I got that, I started thinking to myself, okay, yeah. So it's okay to set a goal I don't know how to achieve. In fact, I should set goals that I don't know how to achieve, because it's the setting of the goal that begins the process of figuring out how to achieve it. And why I like the plans in sand is because I will have an initial plan and I will start. And inevitably I will go the wrong way and I'll have to erase that plan and I'll have to draw it again, just like the waves erase whatever's happened, on the beach that day, or high tide does, whatever. So it really gave it was really just a nice visual representation of take the first step. It's probably not going to be in the right direction, or if the first step is, the second one may not be. But just because it doesn't lead to the direction of the, directly to the direction of achieving the goal, doesn't mean that it was a wasted step. It was just a step that had to be taken in order for you to figure out the ones that will get you directly to the goal. So that's what the plans in sand mean. Like don't worry about set the goal. Don't worry about how you're going to get there. Just start, and the
Yeah.
answer will come.
Yeah, a lot of times people just throw out their goals altogether when they just need to switch up their strategy or
That's
plan, or
right. They just
what
stop.
is the tactic it's going to take you to get to your goal. Try that. If that's not working, then change the tactic. Don't change the goal. So when I
Yes.
saw that, I'm like, man, that's a really good way of putting that. I can empathize and resonate with that. Awesome. Well, what I like to do is we wrap up the podcast just from a high performance perspective. Just ask you a couple questions. What book have you gifted the most, or has made the greatest impact on you?
Uh yeah, the gifted book. So there have been books that I've gifted over the years. Who Not How, Think and Grow Rich, um, and some others that I don't remember. I don't make a tremendous habit of it. Oh, by the way, Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck is a great book to gift.
This is a
Um,
great gift that I received in the mail for you.
yeah,
I
there you go.
appreciate it. So I'm
I
sure you've
have
gifted that one quite a
I
bit.
have gifted that one the most. I will say that. Yes.
Great book. You
Um,
should pick it up.
but I think I think that Think and Grow Rich is a fantastic book that everyone should read. Whether you buy into all of it or not doesn't matter. But I think that, and that book is by Napoleon Hill.
Mhm.
Um, I love that book. I used to carry it in my bag slash briefcase all the time. Now I have it on my shelf right to the left of where I'm sitting, and it's just marked with yellow stickies all through it, and I just pick it up and I just read a little portion of it. What that book did like more than anything for me is it essentially, helped me understand how my mind works and helped me understand how to make the most of really every experience that I end up interacting with. And he just had a really nice way of putting a system to it, um, and it's powerful. It's a powerful book without being it's not woo woo. It's powerful, and it's
Yeah.
yeah. So that's my
It's very
answer.
to the point. And, I know for me personally, I think the mastermind principle he talks about is probably one that's had the biggest impact on me is
Yeah.
getting involved in groups and, going at it alone will only get you so far. But when you connect with other like-minded people, it's powerful. That's an excellent book that definitely, if you haven't read it, you should definitely check it out. You need to put that on your to-do list. What does your morning routine look like? I'm always fascinated about people's morning routines. What does your morning routine look like?
It's pretty much the same thing every day because I tried to do that with a lot of my life so that I don't have to make a lot of decisions. So I get up around 6 o'clock normally. I have um, uh, I take 3 vitamins, fish oil, vitamin D, and I take NAD, and then I have some breakfast, which is you almost always some yogurt, fat free, not fat free, no sugar yogurt with um, Magic Spoon cereal. If you've never had Magic Spoon cereal, it's a sugar free cereal that tastes really good with blueberries. And I have 1 piece of gluten free toast. And then I normally walk my dog. Our driveway is about a half mile long, so I walk the dog there and back for sure, sometimes longer. And then when I get back, I start my day, either my podcast or working on whatever I'm working on.
That's awesome. I'm always fascinated how people kind of start their day.
Oh, my Athletic Greens, I do that too. I take this powder supplement called Athletic Greens. It mixed with water. It gives you pretty much all of your almost 100% of all of the nutrients you need for the day. And I've been doing that for years now, and I just enjoy. I don't know if it actually helps. I'll be honest with you, but it makes me feel like it helps, and so I
And
do it.
placebo effect. If it doesn't work, at least you got that right.
Yes,
It's
right. Yeah.
powerful.
Hmm.
Are you a runner by chance? I'm looking over your shoulder. Is that a bunch of medals behind you?
No, that's my beer can collection from when
Oh,
I was a
beer
kid.
cans. Oh, that's a
Yeah.
good collection to have too. It looked like the
Yeah.
way they're hanging. They look like a bunch of I'm a runner, so it looks like a bunch
Yeah,
of
no,
medals hanging
I'm
behind you.
not
You're a beer drinker. What's your favorite beer?
I'm not a beer drinker anymore.
Just collect the cans.
That's from when I was a kid. My mom sent me those when she was cleaning out the garage about 2 years ago, maybe, and they're really cool. So I just cleaned them all up and put them up. But I don't drink much beer anymore. But back when I was a kid, no, I'm just kidding.
That is good. Yeah. Well, I always like to hand off the microphone to my guest to ask me a question, anything you want. So, what question do you have of me?
Jay, what? So we were talking before we went on about the 5 words. My future is my property, and I'm wondering what what future is your property?
Wow. We didn't even, I meant to ask you about your 5 words. We didn't get to that.
No, we didn't, but we're getting to it now.
We're getting to it now. My future is my property. I've really, when you wrote that in the book and I posted on Facebook this morning, I've really been thinking about that concept. My future is my property. And just really thinking about like, I just, man, this might be a long answer. I don't know. I'm just kind of just thinking out loud right now. I think about like, what are the things that I'm doing to get, what do I specifically want the future to look like? My property, as I'm thinking like currently in time now, like I want to grow the Do Hard Things Nation to a community. I'm going to create a mastermind. I'm going to retire from the military, creating this mastermind, this community, the apparel brand. And I don't know. I want to be able to travel. I want to grow the nation into like a community, bring on a team of people, bring in some other coaches, and just create this very unique organization of like-minded people. That's the mission. And when I think about it, like in the terms of my property, I'm thinking about like, okay, what does my property look like? I'm really like, I need to gain a little bit more clarity on what this specifically looks like. So I think of a property, I think of, okay, I got a fence line, I got a house, I got a yard,
Hmm.
what's in the garage, like what? And so I've been kind of really stewing on that this morning a little bit. So what does that mean to you? My future, why was that so profound to you? What does that mean to you? My future is my property.
Well, at first it just was this whole thing about, tomorrow doesn't have to be like today, right? It's just from a conceptual standpoint, my future is my property means that I own it, means that,
I own it. Yeah.
yeah. So it means that I have to, find it, negotiate with it, pay for it, and own it. And once I own it, it's mine. It's nobody else's at that point. So it gives me a lot of clarity on what's mine.
Yeah.
And um, I don't think many people have that kind of clarity on what's theirs. They think that the future is just something that's going to happen to them. And when I heard that, I said, no, that's how I thought too. And I was like, nope, that's not
Yeah.
that's not the way it is. The future, yeah, it can be deliberate. And so
Yeah.
I made it I made it deliberate. And then you build out from there, similar to that thing you described, like the fence and all this stuff. You can visualize it all different kinds of ways, but really it comes down to specificity, right? It's what do you want to own? Nobody thinks about owning something that they can't describe,
Yeah.
right? Like in normal terms, right? You don't like, oh, I'm going to own a car. Well, what kind of car? Well, I don't know. Maybe it'll have wheels. I'm not sure. Nobody does that. But when you ask them about their future, they go, I don't know. Maybe I'll, like you just said, oh, maybe I'll build a community. Well, what's a community mean? I'll have, I'll hire a few coaches. Well, how many? When? And it's just gets you when you own something, it's just all different, right? It's just like I own this. This is what it looks
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. When I think of property, I'm thinking of like just you start off with land and then you build it. You build it up. You put, barbed wire fence? You're going to put an electric fence. You're going to put a wooden fence.
Right.
What's on it? Are you going to raise cattle? Are you going to have like you're going to raise crops? What kind of structure is it going to be? An A-frame, a double wide trailer, a mansion? Like what is that? So it really got me thinking like, okay, clarity. I need more clarity. I have control over what I am building. What do I specifically want to build? My future is my property. And I really like that. I really like that. And so I've been
Yeah.
thinking about that.
Yeah. And once you own your future, you're on your way to achieving it.
Yeah.
But
Because I'm in that I'm early entrepreneurial phase. I'm in the
right.
grind phase, I think, right now. And a lot of
Oh,
times,
you're still in the dream phase, I think.
maybe I haven't quite. I feel like I'm grinding, but definitely putting the sweat equity in at the moment. But but as I have held myself back. Like I wanted to start this podcast a long time ago, but I didn't. I always held myself back. It's got to be perfect, right? And then Seth Godin's like, you got to ship it. You got to just start shipping
Yeah.
things out and throwing it out there.
Ship
And
it.
as
Yeah.
I have done that, I've gained more clarity. But now I'm at a point is like, okay, transition from the military is like a real thing. It's going to happen. Okay, where are we taking this thing? How am I going to build my property? Because
Right.
I'm staking my claim to it. And what is that going to look like? And so that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. Good. Well, you're
So,
thinking about it, and that's the first step, right?
absolutely. And I look forward to bringing you back someday and you can start to take a tour of my property.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good, Jay.
Well, is there anything else that you, as we wrap this thing up, that we need to know about you, or anything else you want to get off your chest?
Look at anything you want to know about me that we haven't talked about today. You can find on my website, which is my name, Mike Malatesta, MALATESTA.com. My book is there, Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. You can get that on Amazon. You can get it on Audible if you are a listener of books. My podcast information is there. It's called How Did Happen. And, there's all kinds of information about me and my coaching program, which is called Ownership Coaching. I coach, high performing entrepreneurs with companies that are from 10 to 250 million in revenue on how to imagine their futures and create a path to make that future real. So it's just what we were just talking about. That's what I help people with.
Awesome. And I'll put all the contact information in the show notes. So I encourage my listeners to go out there and pick up a copy of Ownership and connect with Mike, reach out to him. And Mike, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast today. And we did a pretty good deep dive and overview of all the things in your life. And I just appreciate you being vulnerable and open and sharing all these, your life lessons. And hopefully this inspires someone. So thank you.
Yeah, I hope so. And what you're doing is inspiring people as well, Jay. So congratulations on that. Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So for everyone else out there listening, keep doing hard things. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the podcast. If you like this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you're notified of future episodes. I would also love to know, what is your takeaway? What insight did you get from today's episode? You can screenshot this, send it to me on social, post it on social, tag me. And when you share like that, someone else out there may need to hear this message today. Only 10% of people are engaged in personal growth and development. And there could be a nugget here that could put someone on a positive trajectory. So feel free to share that, tag me in it, send me a direct message, send me an email, let me know what your thoughts are. And you can connect with me on all social media. You can send me an email at j@jteagues.com. Take a moment, leave a review on iTunes. No matter if you're listening to Spotify or any other platform, like iTunes, I guess is the gold standard for reviews, and it really goes a long way for the algorithm for people searching for personal growth and development, and it helps us go a long way. It means a lot to me that you took a couple minutes to do them. I read through all of them, and it just feels good knowing that this show is impactful. So if you gain any value, you just ask that you do that. If you want to level up, you want to take the next step in your personal growth and development, you can go to jteagues.com, jaytiegs.com. We got a variety of options. We got one-on-one coaching, high performance coaching through the High Performance Institute, certified high performance coach. We've got a few different curriculums that I take people through. I also do group coaching. If you have an organization that needs a speaker, or you want a live workshop, I can come in and deliver some training to you and your organization. We also have the exclusive Forge Mastermind group that is an elite community of like-minded people that are growing together. And we have a weekly call there, and we're going to be rolling out new content for that. And then also we got apparel. So we've got go to dohardthingsapparel.com. Get you a Do Hard Things shirt. Show the world that you do hard things. We got hoodies over there. We got hats. We got stickers. We got patches. A variety of different things, and we got a variety of different models coming out. So you can show the world that you do hard things, and you can go over there and support us that way. That'd be great. So in the meantime, thank you so much for listening. Keep doing hard things. We'll see you guys